You call it love, but what you really feel is dependency. You've confused craving with connection. You've been conditioned to believe that needing someone is romantic, that anxiety is passion, and that being consumed by another is a noble act. That's not love. That's enslavement, and you've bought it willingly, because the truth is harder to bear. You don't want love. You want validation. You want someone to tell you that you're enough, because deep down, you're afraid that you're not. Let me ask you something. If she stopped texting you back tomorrow, would you crumble? Then no, you're not in love. You're addicted. And she's not your salvation. She's your supplier. True love is an expression of the self, not a surrender of it. Soren Kierkegaard, but you've already surrendered. You handed over your peace, your power, and your personhood just to keep someone beside you, even if they only ever truly offered their body, not their soul. And here comes rule number 1. If you need love to feel worthy, then you're not in love. You're begging for permission to exist. Think about that. What you call love is often just a mirror. You're chasing someone who reflects your hidden wounds, not someone who heals them. You want them to fill the void that you refuse to face on your own. Kierkegaard understood this tragedy well. He didn't idealize love, he dissected it. And what he found wasn't a fairy tale, but a battlefield. In his writings, particularly in Either Or, he paints love as something terrifying. Not because love itself is evil, but because humans are too spiritually weak to carry it. Real love, requires you to stand as a complete individual first. But most men today are hollow, soft, incomplete. They want love to complete them, and so they surrender to it, not enter it. And that is the beginning of their fall. Let's borrow a darker voice now, Nietzsche. He said, "What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil." That should frighten you, because most men don't fall in love. They fall into madness, obsession, degradation. They abandon their principles in the name of being chosen. They make sacrifices that no self-respecting man should ever make. They stop being men. They become emotional hostages to a smile, a silence, a withheld reply. They lose their ability to walk away, and thus, they lose everything. You think you're being romantic, but what you're really doing is negotiating your own destruction. You bend, you please, you perform. And she just watches. Not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. Because deep down, even she knows if you were truly powerful, she wouldn't need to test your limits. You let love drag you down because you believed what society told you, that love is supposed to hurt, that it's about sacrifice, that it's okay to lose yourself in someone else. No, love is supposed to elevate you. If it doesn't, it's not love. It's a trap. And the more you give without boundaries, the more she loses respect. Not because she's evil, but because women are biologically drawn to strength, not surrender. And that brings us back to Kierkegaard. He didn't marry. He walked away from the woman he adored, not because he didn't love her, but because he knew real love must be built on truth. And the truth is, most people aren't ready for it. They want possession, not presence. Control, not communion. Comfort, not confrontation. They want the illusion of love without its fire. So they play roles. They perform affection. They simulate passion. And you buy into it because you're afraid to be alone. But here's a bitter pill. If you can't face yourself in solitude, you'll never love anyone without turning them into your prison. This is where your suffering begins, not because love betrayed you, but because you entered it as a beggar, not a king. You made her your oxygen. Now she's suffocating you, and she will leave. Or worse, stay and quietly resent your weakness until you both rot in resentment. This isn't love. This is spiritual decay. And if you don't wake up now, you'll confuse every chain for a hug, every scar for a memory, every slow death for devotion. You've been lied to, and you believed it because it felt good. You were taught that loving hard makes you noble, that loving unconditionally is a strength, that sacrificing yourself is what real men do when they find the one. But Kierkegaard, the man who walked away from the only woman he ever loved, would disagree. His story is the quiet tragedy that no one talks about. He loved Regine Olsen, loved her deeply, but he left her. Not because he stopped loving, but because he knew something you don't. To love another person, truly, Kierkegaard wrote, one must first learn how to be alone. Let that sink in. Most men today love because they're terrified of solitude. You love because you're afraid of facing yourself. So what do? You fall hard. You chase intensely. You give without measure. You promise forever to someone who hasn't even earned your honesty. And when they start to withdraw, you double down. You call it fighting for love. But what you're really doing is begging to not be abandoned. You call it devotion. But it's dependency. And Kierkegaard, he saw this dependency for what it really is. Spiritual weakness masquerading as romantic courage. In The Seducer's Diary, a part of Either Or, he constructs a fictional character named Johannes. Johannes seduces a young girl not to possess her physically, but to prove a deeper, darker truth. That love for most people is not about the beloved, it's about the ego. Johannes didn't want the girl, he wanted her to fall. He wanted her soul to be wrapped around his name. He wanted the power to wound her with absence, not embrace her with presence. Why? Because domination is the hidden impulse beneath many so-called romances. And here's truth number 2. Love makes you weak not because you loved the wrong person, but because you never stood alone before you gave yourself away. You built your identity around her approval, around her texts, her body, her attention. You outsourced your sense of self-worth to her emotional availability. And that is why she now holds power over you, not because she's cruel, but because you offered your neck. And it gets worse. You think suffering is love? You romanticize the sleepless nights, the unanswered texts, the cryptic silences. You call it passion. You say she's hard to read. You write poems about the ache, but you never ask why you're addicted to the ache. Carl Jung would tell you, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So you chase women, but you're running from yourself. You love them, but it's your shadow you're projecting. You think you're pursuing her, but what you're really doing is avoiding the man in the mirror. And here's the catch. Even if you win her, even if she says yes, even if she stays, she will feel your dependence. She will sense the desperation beneath your gifts, your compliments, your promises. And eventually, she will grow cold, because respect dies where neediness thrives. Love, real love, cannot bloom in the soil of self-abandonment. You gave her everything, but forgot to remain a man she could admire. That's what Kierkegaard feared the most. That by giving himself fully to love, he would lose his becoming. He wasn't cold. He was terrified that by being swallowed into Regine's world, he would abandon the call of truth he felt burning in his soul. So he walked away, not to be cruel, but to be honest. And you stay, not out of strength, but because you don't know how to breathe without her. You endure insults, you accept indifference, you chase breadcrumbs and call it destiny. But I love her, you say. No, you love who you think you are when she looks at you with softness. You love the mirror she gives you. And when that mirror cracks, when her eyes no longer shine, when her affection fades, you begin to die inside. Not because she's gone, but because you were never whole to begin with. And that's the tragedy. Men who love too much always lose themselves. They don't just risk rejection. They risk annihilation of self, of pride, of masculinity. They become unrecognizable, shells of who they were before the fall. Smiling for her approval, apologizing for their strength, questioning their worth. And society cheers them on. It tells them they're romantic, noble, modern. But deep down, every man who's been there, who's lain awake wondering why he's still not enough, knows the truth. This isn't love. This is emotional enslavement dressed in the clothes of devotion. Kierkegaard saw it. He wrote it. He lived it. And then he chose his soul over a shared life. Can you? You don't see the chains. That's what makes them so effective. They aren't made of steel or rope, but silence, inconsistency, hope. You call it love, but what you're really trapped in is a psychological maze where your self-worth depends on the mood of another. One moment she's warm, the next cold. One moment you're everything, the next invisible, and still you stay. Why? Because deep inside you believe love is supposed to feel this way. That pain means it's real. That if it doesn't hurt, it must not be deep. You've been conditioned to associate chaos with connection. But what you're really doing is mistaking emotional volatility for intimacy. Modern man does not live. He reacts. Heidegger, you're not in love. You're reacting. To texts, to tone, to glances, to attention given or withheld. You wake up and check your phone like it's a lifeline. You read messages like scripture. You wait for her to smile, to say your name, to give you a fraction of the affection you pour out so easily. But here's rule number 3. The more afraid you are of losing her, the more you've already lost yourself. Because this isn't love, this is emotional slavery. She doesn't even need to manipulate you. You do it to yourself. You've internalized the leash. You anticipate her reactions. You walk on eggshells. You hide your opinions just to maintain peace. And this is where the prison forms. You no longer act from self. You act from fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being alone, not physically, but existentially. You've allowed love to become your compass. But it doesn't point north. It spins based on her moods, her desires, her whims. And now you are lost. Not because she took anything from you, but because you offered your identity for the illusion of connection. Let me be brutally clear. No woman can truly love a man who has no internal authority. And deep down, she knows when you've surrendered yours. You think compromise will save the relationship. You think self-sacrifice is noble. You think being agreeable is attractive. But women, especially emotionally intelligent women, don't want a man who bends to survive. They want a man who stands even when it risks being left. Because what you don't understand is that she tests you not to break you, but to find out whether she can respect you. And when you fail that test, when you whimper, when you chase, when you lose your center, her instincts revolt. She may not say it. She may not even realize it. But she feels it. And what she feels is the death of polarity, the collapse of the masculine. The moment you accept another's will as your own, you have ceased to be. Soren Kierkegaard. So now you're in prison, a quiet one. You no longer speak your mind. You no longer assert your truth. You agree to things you hate just to avoid conflict. She says something disrespectful. You let it go. She withdraws for days. You wait like a dog at the door, because you've convinced yourself, if I just love her harder, she'll come back. But here's truth number 4, love that demands. The death of your boundaries is not love. It's bondage. And here's where it gets even darker. Sometimes you get a hit, a smile, a compliment, a kiss. Your brain lights up like a drug addict finding his stash. You feel alive again. You think it's working. You think this is real love. But what you're actually experiencing is trauma bonding. You're stuck in a cycle of tension release and reward, the same cycle abusers use to condition victims. No, she may not be abusive. She might not even be aware. But the structure is there. You've tied your self-worth to her affection. And now your nervous system is enslaved to her attention. You can't think clearly. You can't sleep. You lose interest in your goals, your purpose, your brothers, because she is everything. And without her, you feel like nothing. You don't need more flowers. You don't need more dates. You don't need to work on the relationship. You need to remember who you are without her. You need to cut the cord, not to punish her, but to liberate yourself. The self must be broken to be reborn. But too many men die before they're ever born, because they refuse to face the silence within, Jung. So here you are, a prisoner, but the door is wide open. You just can't walk through it, because part of you believes the cage is safer than the void. But listen carefully now. She is not your salvation. She is your mirror. And that mirror is showing you something ugly. The boy inside you starving for love. The man you should have become, but abandoned for a kiss. You can scream about betrayal. You can blame her coldness. You can cry about how you gave everything. But the truth is simple. You traded your crown for comfort. And now you're reaping the cost. You say you want freedom, but you chase comfort. You say you want truth, but you choose illusion every time it looks like love. And here's the hard reality. You cannot be free and be emotionally enslaved at the same time. Most men try to do both. They whisper about becoming strong, stoic, disciplined. But they still check her stories at 2 a.m. They still wait for the next message to validate their worth. They still soften their edges to fit into someone else's idea of a safe man. And that brings us to truth number 5. Love does not save you. It tests you. It doesn't complete you. It exposes you. It reveals how much of yourself you've actually built, and how much of you is just a desperate echo looking for someone to reflect it back. You thought love would fix your wounds, but all it did was highlight them. You thought she'd make you whole, but she simply mirrored the emptiness you never had the courage to face. That's why you lose yourself in her. Not because she's so powerful, but because you are so unanchored. You gave her the script. You handed over the power to define you, and now you're confused why you feel hollow when she pulls away. You weren't betrayed. You were revealed. And the man who gets revealed but refuses to transform, he becomes pathetic. Worse than the weak. Because he saw the truth and still chose the lie. The greatest pain is not to be unloved. It is to be unknown, even by yourself. Kierkegaard, let that burn. You think the pain you feel comes from her departure? No. It comes from the silence you finally hear when the noise of obsession fades. It's not about losing her. It's about realizing you never truly had yourself. Now here's where most men break. They scramble to fill the silence. They date someone new. They chase the next hit. They convince themselves that this time it'll be different. But it never is. Because the common denominator is still you, unformed, uncertain, unfinished. You keep entering relationships as an emotional orphan, hoping someone will adopt you. That's not love. That's dependency dressed in compliments. Kierkegaard walked away from Regine Olsen, not because he was cold, but because he was honest. He knew he wasn't ready to lead someone else through life, while still wrestling with his own soul. So he chose solitude. He chose becoming. He chose the furnace over the feast. Could you do the same? Or would you rather cling to illusions and rot? Let me ask you directly. Would you rather be worshipped for a version of yourself that's fake? Or be alone while becoming the man you were meant to be? Because most of you, if we're being honest, would rather be adored than transformed. You'd rather be liked than feared, chosen than powerful, needed than respected. And that's why you lose. That's why she leaves. Or worse, stays but never submits. Because she sees you, the little boy playing the role of a man, praying that she'll mistake neediness for depth. And she won't, not for long. That's when the coldness sets in. That's when the tension grows. That's when you feel like a ghost in your own skin. You think she's cruel, but the truth is, she's just reacting to your lack of sovereignty. He who cannot stand alone must not claim to lead another. Nietzsche. So what now? You have two options. You can double down on illusion. Keep calling obsession devotion. Keep chasing emotional scraps and calling it romance. Keep losing yourself and pretending it's being in love. Or you can break and begin again. You can face the silence. You can suffer deliberately and emerge forged. You can become the man who doesn't beg for love, but brings presence so powerful, love has no choice but to orbit him. You think that's fantasy? It's not. But it costs everything you've built your fake identity on. Your scripts, your habits, your insecurities, your need to be chosen. All of it must die. The man who does not risk his false self will never find his true one, Jung. And now we arrive at the final doorway. Love when you are weak is a leash. Love when you are strong is a fire. It doesn't warm you, it purifies you. but only if you can survive its judgment. You cannot be half a man expecting a woman to give you a whole relationship. You cannot be needy and expect her to respect you. You cannot serve illusion and still expect truth to bless you. It's either comfort or character. It's either addiction or awakening. You must choose the freedom of self or the illusion of love. There is no in-between. You've heard everything now. You've looked into the mirror of Kierkegaard's soul, of Nietzsche's will, of Jung's shadow. You've seen the cost of false love, and yet you hesitate, because there's still a voice inside you that whispers, "But what if she comes back? But what if I love harder? But what if this is the one?" Let me tell you, in no uncertain terms, that voice will destroy you. That voice is not hope. It is cowardice in disguise. It wants you to stay trapped in comfort to keep chasing illusions. It wants you to rot slowly, smiling, while your soul collapses from the inside. It wants you weak, obedient, domesticated. But you're here now, and that means something inside you, however buried, however faint, still remembers. You were not born to beg. You were not built to chase approval, to fear silence, to die of thirst in the desert of someone else's emotions. You were made for fire. Not just passion, but the fire of clarity, of sovereignty, of truth. The greatest despair is not that you are unloved. It is that you never became yourself. Soren Kierkegaard. So let me ask you, who are you without her? Without the hope of her return? The idea of her gaze, the ghost of her validation. Who are you when you strip away the fantasies? Because most men, and I mean most, will never answer that question. They will die in emotional cages they built with their own hands. They'll smile at family dinners, post vacation photos, pretend everything's fine. But inside they'll rot quietly, still hoping for a message, still scrolling through old photos, still chasing a shadow. And no one will mourn the man they could have been. Rule number 6, the final rule. The man who cannot walk alone is already half dead. Let me be brutal with you because no one else will. You don't need her. You need to become worthy of being missed. You don't need closure. You need transformation. You don't need a second chance. You need a funeral. A burial for the version of you who begged, who hoped, who traded truth for touch, masculinity for approval. Burn that man, because until he dies, the real you cannot live. You think you're being romantic? You're not. You're delaying your awakening. You think it's love. It's addiction. You're chasing pain because pain feels familiar. You call it deep connection because chaos was modeled to you as love. But here's what real love looks like. A man standing tall, unshaken by rejection, unmoved by silence, rooted in purpose, unbothered by attention, guided by vision. He does not beg. He does not cling. He does not perform. He walks. And because he walks, she either follows or fades, and either outcome is fine. You must be willing to lose everything, to become who you truly are. Nietzsche. So here's your final test. Can you sit in your own silence without reaching for distraction? Can you look in the mirror and see a man, not a boy, needing love, but a force worthy of it? Can you face the abyss of solitude and smile? Because if you can't, then you will love from weakness. You will attract the same pattern again. You will suffer again. You will call it fate. You will write sad poems and scream at the gods. But the gods are not punishing you. They're waiting for you to stop running, to stop kneeling, to rise. The self is not something found. It is something forged. Kierkegaard. Forge yourself, or stay broken. There is no savior coming. No perfect woman, no final text, no healing hug. Only you and the man you choose to become. So here it is, the final choice. Walk alone, or die slowly in illusion. That's it. Not poetic, not romantic, not easy, but it's real. Because love isn't supposed to save you. It's supposed to meet you when you've already saved yourself. Now stand up, burn the scripts, delete the photos, let her go, and walk.